I had to hold off writing this for several reasons. The biggest reason is that I wanted to give myself some time for my anger to subside, the cause of which I will discuss later. The second reason is that I have not been feeling well, nor have I been sleeping well. I didn't have the energy to write down what has been going on since the last post. The third reason, which I am certain has everything to do with the second reason, is that I have been experiencing quite a bit more than just music in the bathroom lately. The day after Jason and I took Billy to school, I returned to work and tried to go about my day as normal. Rather, as normal as you can be with the knowledge that your nephew is being terrorized by a dead man, and there is very little, if anything, you can do to stop it. I was succeeding in this endeavor too, that is, until I went to use the bathroom. The room was empty when I entered, and although it felt eerie considering what had happened the previous day, I went about my business as usual. After a minute, the room felt colder. The just barely audible ragtime music that had accompanied the temperature change was also unsettling, but I could not shake the feeling that someone was staring at me. Instinctively, I spun around to look behind me. Of course, nobody was there, but I didn't feel like I was alone in there anymore. This was the kind of feeling I was referring to in Mr. Sweetly. It was exactly like that in every public bathroom that I had used since reading the damn poem. No matter where I was, be it work, a restaurant, anywhere, the air in the bathroom would become cold and ragtime music would seem to play from the vent. That is not the extent of it though. I know now that the cold and the volume of the music increases the longer I'm in there because I decided, after a few days of the initial incident, to stay in the bathroom at work for a while after everyone else had left for the day. I needed to know if it was just paranoia or if it was legitimately experiencing this. So I stayed in there, just standing, and I waited. Eventually, I felt the air go colder, and bumps started to form on my skin. The music, too, began though as if it was the first a faint whisper. However, by the time I finally ran out of the room, I was shivering, and the music was so loud that I felt the beginning of a migraine. I could actually see my breath, and the music started to almost sound as though it was playing in my own head. At first, I would experience these kinds of things exclusively in public bathrooms, so I did not think that I would no longer be safe elsewhere. However, I have since begun to experience other odd occurrences in my own home. I've been waking up with a peculiar sensation, like water is stuck in my ears. It sometimes feels as though something is fluttering inside my ear canal, and everything I hear is soft and muffled. When I first wake, it feels as if though there was a great amount of pressure applied to the side of my head as I slept. For a week and a half now, I've been experiencing this, but I feel like I've gone deaf, or like I have been submerged in water for prolonged periods of time. The first morning that I woke up with this feeling, I threw up after I got out of bed. The pressure I felt in my head had begun to pulsate painfully, and I felt disoriented as a result. My vision was shaky, and my eyelids were heavy due to the pain. The throbbing sensation, coupled with the way that the room seemed to move as soon as I stood up, made my stomach turn. I barely made it to the toilet and nearly fell as I rushed to the bathroom, which would have led to my head cracking against the sink of the toilet. Though I feel sick in the morning because of the new sensation, the pain has somewhat dulled. I'm unsure if that is because I've gotten used to it though. At first, I had no reason to believe this had anything to do with what I had been experiencing in public bathrooms. But then I also noticed that the TV in my living room would be on in the morning when I woke up. I can't fall asleep if there is even a hint of light or sound, so I make sure to turn off anything in my apartment that produces either one of those things before I go to bed every night. This is especially true lately, since I have been having great difficulty falling asleep at all. Not wanting to jump to unnecessary conclusions though, I thought the TV may be broken, so I had my neighbor down the hall and an electrician look at it, but it couldn't find anything wrong or damaged. The occurrence that convinced me that I was followed, though, came the morning that Jason and I were going to speak to my sister, Liz. The bathroom in my apartment was fairly small. There's just enough room for me to move about, but it can be uncomfortable. Were I a larger man, it would be impossible. The toilet faces the shower, and if I were to sit and stretch out my legs, my feet would easily touch the bathtub. If you are facing the shower, the sink is directly to the right of the toilet, next to the door. If someone were in there with you, behind the shower curtain perhaps, it would become obvious pretty quickly that you were not alone. As I was getting ready to talk to my sister about the situation, it felt like if someone was standing there in my shower, watching me. Of course, when I pulled the curtain open, nobody was there, but it was unnerving. The worst of it, however, when I was shaving, I nicked myself pretty badly because I could have sworn there was someone I saw in the mirror, watching me from over the shower bar. I grabbed a hand towel and applied pressure to the cut on my neck as I ripped the curtain open the second time. Again, there was nobody standing there. Since this incident, my shower curtain remains open at all times. I put a towel down to absorb the water that splashes onto the floor as a result. The smell of mildew is a small price to pay. My stomach was tight in knots that morning. I had been feeling progressively more sick the longer I had to wait to speak to Liz about Billy. Jason and I had originally planned to speak to her the day after Halloween, but we had to postpone. I felt like I was going to vomit when I received her text that she, her husband, Norm, and Billy were going to stay over with his cousins in New Jersey that weekend. Can we please do this some other day? I'll promise it'll be soon, that text concluded. I cursed at myself for not outright telling her that the important thing that I needed to discuss was Billy's safety. I wanted her to start panicking and demanding that I tell her right then, either through text or over the phone. This felt like something that needed to be addressed in person. I was thinking about that on the drive over, and I wasn't sure how Liz would react. My stomach lurched when Jason and I pulled up over to her house. She was outside, getting ready to take her flower pots inside now that the weather is getting colder. She looked up at us and waved with a big smile. She has no idea, was the only thought that kept repeating in my head from the first moment I saw her. It feels awful to be the person to give bad news, especially to someone you love. And it's even worse still if it's about someone you both love. She put down the watering can and ran up her walkway to give me a bear hug. "Hey kid," she said as she wrapped her arms around me. Liz, who is the older one, has screamed me like this my whole life. I found myself wishing that she wasn't so happy to see me. I forced a smile and we followed her inside. "Where's the little guy?" Jason asked when Billy didn't immediately rush into the room to greet us as always. "Boys day out. Just Billy and his daddy," Liz said as she cleared off the table and put on a pot of coffee. After she set cookies and some paper plates on the table, she took a moment to breathe. "So," she said, "what's so important that you guys wanted to tell me in person?" We sat down and began to tell her that we were worried about Billy as she poured coffee. At first, she seemed every bit as concerned as we were. When we began to tell her about who Mr. Sweetley was, however, she began to take us less seriously. The real low point was when she laughed at us. "You have got to be joking, Jimmy," she said. The look of disbelief she wore was intermingled with faux amusement. "Halloween was last week. Stop trying to scare me. That's sick." "Liz, this isn't a joke. Why would I make up something so terrible? Why would I joke about Billy being in danger?" She thought for a moment, but shrugged. "I don't know, but it's not funny." Jason let out an exasperated sigh. "You're right. There's nothing funny about this. I went through exactly what Billy is going through right now, and I'm fucked up for life, Liz. Please, don't do that to Billy." "So what? Norm and I just pull him out of school a couple months in and put him in somewhere else? Where we don't know anyone? Just because you're telling me there's a ghost hunting at the school that nobody else can see." "The kids can see him, Liz, and yes, that's exactly what you guys do. He'll adjust, and you'll get over it," I said, getting more irritated and hostile by the second. "What does that mean?" she asked, folding her arms. "You're more worried about your fucking PTA friends than you are about the creep possibly hurting your kid," I said. I knew that this would cause a huge fight, but I was angry and said the most cruel things that I could think of in that moment. I felt sorry for saying it almost immediately. Liz had wanted to be a mother since I could remember. She would die for her son without a thought, and I do understand how things must have sounded at her end, but I didn't know what else to say to get through to her. I thought that if I had said something hurtful, she might dwell on it and really have to think about our discussion. The argument that ensued was explosive. "What the fuck did you just say, you little shit?" Liz yelled, standing and leaning towards me over the table. "I said that you don't give a damn about your kid. Why the fuck would I make up something like this? You're so goddamn thick, Liz," I yelled back, standing myself and pointing at her. The anger had completely washed over me at this point, and I felt much less guilty for saying it this time. It continued like this for about 10 minutes before she kicked Jason and I out and banned me from seeing Billy. I'm not even allowed to see him for his birthday in a couple of months. I've been sick over this, and if I think about it long, I become furious and upset all over again. "You're probably the reason he's been having all those nightmares," she yelled at us just before slamming the door. "Those nightmares?" I thought. "How long has he been having those nightmares?" My heart sunk in my stomach. I had to stop myself from thinking about it before I went insane. Since I hadn't been sleeping well, Jason had driven us over to Liz's house. When we got out of his car, I kicked the tire in anger and tore the door open. I dropped into the seat and slammed the door shut. Jason got in more gracefully than I had, and we sat there in silence for a few moments. "Now what?" he he asked. I considered punching him. He had been on my shit list for a couple of weeks, ever since before we spoke to Liz. Truth be told, the more I think about this, the angrier with Jason I become. I can understand his not wanting to tell me about any of this in high school, but the day before Billy was born, he should have told me. He should have said something. If he had, maybe none of this would be happening. Anyway, at that moment, I decided that punching him would get me nowhere. We keep looking for evidence, I replied flatly. We make it impossible for my sister to keep him there. There have to be other people who have seen this. I'll track them all down if I have to. Jason and I both knew the improbability of my being able to find every single person who had ever seen Sweetly, but he remained mercifully silent in my comment, allowing me to brood. He turned the ignition and began to drive. After a few more minutes of silence, we began to discuss how we would go about contacting people. Facebook was the most logical choice, so I sent messages right then to the only people I knew who had been through this, explaining the situation. Pete, Jamal, and Sam. A few moments later, I noticed that Pete saw my message. I haven't heard back, and I'm pretty sure that he blocked me. We pulled up to my apartment building, and Jason told me to get some sleep. He told me that I looked like a zombie. Again, I felt the itch to punch him, but didn't. Instead, I got out of the car and slammed the door behind me without saying a word. I'm not sure what it is I'm looking for. I'm not even sure that I'll find anything, but I have to try. Hopefully, I'll hear back from Sam or Jamal. Both would be nice, but I'm not really banking on either of them lending a hand, especially not after Pete's apparent refusal. I'll write about whatever I find, if anything. I am so sorry if I dragged anyone else into this with me. So, this is the part where I ask you guys to help me out. Hit like and subscribe if you liked my readings. Share it with your friends, and also send me links to your stories you want me to read. They have to be open for any narrator to read, but besides that, I'm open for all ideas. Thanks for your help, and if things work out, I'll be posting regularly, and we'll likely start a Patreon site. Again, thanks. This can't happen without you guys.